we think that's the intellectual period, right? Where they need to learn all this information. But the reality is, actually, the intellectual period is between 6 to 12. Right? If we give the children, if we plant the seeds of all this information, if we plant the seeds and we provide an environment that's rich in intellectual information, intellectual development, the child will acquire all of that, and then when they're 18 and they come to do the SPM, it'll be easy. It's not that time from 12 to 18 is not supposed to be the time the child is sitting there and studying all this, right? So it's a completely different way. It's a completely different way of thinking of childhood, because we think that primary age children, you go to school to learn basic maths, basic reading, basic this, basic that, and then you take your UPSR. And I looked at the UPSR, it's so basic. It's so basic, right? Yet so many children fail. Why? Because they're supposed to be learning about science, not learning on a board with a paper and a pen. They're supposed to be getting the plant, growing the plant, experiencing the water cycle, looking at rainbows, studying a pond. That's what they're supposed to be doing. So if you give the child the intellectual information during that stage from 6 to 12, later on it's easy, because the next stage from 12 to 18 is the time where again the child is constructing themselves, but now they're trying to find their identity as an adult. From 12 to 18, they need to find their identity as an adult. But if we put the pressure on the child to study academically between 12 to 18, we pressurize them that they have to study academically in that time, then they're not able to discover who they are. And that's why a lot of teenagers become frustrated, a lot of teenagers give up, a lot of them don't score well in their exams, or they don't do this, or they don't find out, and they just kind of like, they just want to just waste time, right? So many teenagers are like that, right? They reach this point, they're just helpless and hopeless, right? Because we're pressurizing to do something that they're supposed to do between 6 to 12, we're pressurizing them to do between 12 to 18, and putting all the emphasis on that. We're not giving them time to discover who they're supposed to be as an adult. 12 to 18 is a time for self-discovery about who you are as an adult. This child is becoming an adult. They need to have that space and time. And that's why Montessori education gives that intellectual development between 6 to 12, and then 12 to 18, of course they learn academic information, but the focus more is in discovering who you're supposed to be and what your purpose is. And then 18 to 24, Montessori said is maturity, and this is the time where the child now becomes emotional independent. They leave their home, they start up their own family, they start up their own work, and now they should have discovered who they are. They should be certain about what they want to do with their life, right? The seeking of who am I is supposed to be between 12 to 18, so they should have done that already. They should have discovered themselves between 12 to 18, and now after 18 they can just become mature in that characteristic that they are, mature in themselves and their personality. But most of us get stuck. When you look at this journey, most of us get stuck somewhere. So I want you to take a moment, right? Think of yourself. You don't have to tell anyone if you don't want to. Think of yourself. Where are you stuck? Did you get stuck between 12 to 18 because you never had the opportunity to find your identity, and instead you had to, you had all this pressure to study that you just didn't have that opportunity, and then you just became someone that you still don't know who you really are? Or did you get stuck between 6 to 12 because you were not given that opportunity? If you look at a 6 and 7-year-old, they're so curious. Why does it rain? Why are the clouds like that? Why is the beach like this? Why is that shell? Everything is a why, right? And then when you don't answer those questions, they stop asking. So did you get stuck here between 6 to 12 because no one would answer your questions? Because you didn't have an environment where you could discover all these things that interested you? Or did you get stuck between 0 to 6? And that's why you're still not independent, and you still haven't constructed yourself properly, and you're still holding back to that. Where are you stuck? Or are you already mature and you finished the 4th stage, right? If you knew this information when you first had your first child, I'm sure you would have thought differently, right? Don't feel despair, right? This is not about saying you didn't know this and look, you've made all these mistakes. It's not about that. When you hear this information, you should feel excited. You should feel, now I know what to do with my child. Whatever has already happened, that's taqdeer. That's what Allah plans. Allah has His own plan for your child, right? What you have to look at is what you're going to do next. What are you going to do next with this information that you know, right? So take a moment, think about your child. Are they in, which plane of development are they in? Right? Are they between 0 to 6, 6 to 9, 12 to 18? And what is your child's mission? Are they constructing themselves? Are they in that social period? Are they searching for their identity? Or are they now becoming emotionally independent? Which stage is your child at, right? And what are you supposed to be providing for your child? And what we're going to do next is look at some of the things that we're supposed to be providing for our children during that stage, so that you can answer that question about, now you know your child is in the first plane, so what do you do for the first plane? Your child is in the second plane, so what do you do? And Montessori answers all these questions, all the way till 18. Everything can be answered about how to provide an environment, how to support your child, how to interact with them to bring out the best in that period of time. So let's move on. So just really quickly with these triangles, the reason that Montessori chose triangles is because the first part is from 0 to 3, or 6 to 9, or 12 to 15. That is the period of constructing. So whatever mission they have, so for the first one is self-construction. So the child is constructing themselves. So 0 to 3 is the period of construction, and then 3 to 6, as you go down the triangle, is the period of consolidation. So if your child is between the age of 0 to 3, they're still constructing everything from new, right? They're learning how to walk from new, they're learning how to talk, everything is from new, right? But then from 3 to 6, your child is now consolidating. They're refining what they already know. So the child already knows how to walk by 3, but then after 3, now they're learning how to be more in control, so they can walk around without bumping into things, so they can carry things when they're walking, so they can walk quietly and so on. 0 to 3, the child has learned to talk, but between 3 to 6, now the child is learning more vocabulary, they're learning the correct way to say things and to interact with others and so on. So as you go up the triangle, it's a period of construction, down the triangle, a period of consolidation, and that goes throughout your life, right? Whereas the previous chart that I showed you shows is just one triangle going up. So it's just like, it's almost like you're just continuously on this slope going up. But there isn't the realization that you're learning new things, and then you have to put them into practice, and you have to refine them, and you have to be confident with them, and then now you're ready to do another stage of your life, and then you have to refine that, and you have to consolidate. And that's why Montessori used triangles for this diagram. So the first stage, infancy, 0 to 6, we said it's a period of self-construction. Montessori tells us that children have the natural ability to learn and develop and acquire information unconsciously. Children don't even know they're learning. Between 0 to 3, when your child is learning to walk, they don't think, oh, if I put my foot like this, and then I try this, then I'll be walking. They don't think that, right? It's so simple. They don't think that. It's very unconscious. Everything that they learn is unconscious, right? So they have this ability. If the child is learning unconsciously, it means we have to approach them indirectly. Not through a formal lesson, but through our environment and through the way that we are around them, right? And Montessori tells us that this stage is one of the stages that's marked by huge physical growth and mental growth. So this is one of the hottest times in a child's life, where they're going from this baby that sized like this, and suddenly they're like this, right? So they go through this huge physical growth, and also their brain is developing. And actually, science tells us that most of brain development happens before the age of 2.5. And then whatever wasn't done before 2.5, you have until about 5, right? And then after that, the brain development slows down significantly for the rest of their life, right? It does come up again during the adolescence when they're teenagers, but actually brain development happens mostly between the age of 0 to 2.5, right? And this stage of 0 to 6 is a stage where children are focused on reality. A lot of people imagine that for children between 0 to 6, we need to buy them lots of toys, we need to tell them lots of fairy tales, we need to make up lots of stories and have lots of cartoons about all this like fancy stuff going on. But actually the child is not asking for that, they're not seeking that. Remember, this is a stage where the child is constructing themselves. So in order to construct themselves, they need to be connected to reality. Because you want your child to construct a real identity about this world that they're in, not about some fantasy world that they have been watching on some videos or some stories that they've been told, and they create an idea of that. So I want to ask you guys a question. How many of you watched lots of Disney when you were small and you really believed that one day this handsome prince is going to come and he's going to save you and all of your life is going to be better? A lot of people, right? And then when you grow up and you become, you meet your husband or your partner, you meet them and you think, oh yes, this is my prince and everything is going to be so wonderful, I'm going to have a happily ever after. And then you get married and you think, hang on a minute, this is not easy, this is not a fairy tale, because the idea that's constructed in your mind before the age of 6 is this fairy tale life, and fairy tale lives are not real. Even the princes and kings, they don't have a fairy tale life. It's not a happily ever after, right? So that idea is something that was it's not reality, and it was put in the child's mind between the age of 6. So they have built this personality based on this fairy tale. What children need at this time is reality. Everything that you do should be focused on reality, and that's why in Montessori, we don't recommend like fantasy tales before the age of 6. We recommend that most of the child's work should be focused around reality. You want them to learn about real things first. You want to firmly ground your child in the reality of this world before giving them all this imagination and fake stuff. And for Muslims, that reality of this world is that Allah is the creator of the world, that He owns everything, and that every single one of us is put on this earth to discover the universe and take us to Allah. Through learning about the world, we connect stronger to Allah. Through experiencing, you see the rainbow, and you shouldn't just see the rainbow and think, wow, it's so beautiful, but you think, mashallah, look what Allah did. Your first reaction when you see that should be Allah. It shouldn't be just that you enjoy it or the science behind it. It should be, your instinct should be Allah. If you see a tree in front of you, it shouldn't just be that this is a tree. That tree should take you to Allah straight away. That's what we want to install in the children before the age of 6. Giving them that reality that this whole universe is from Allah. Everything that Allah has created in this universe is with the purpose of getting us to know Allah. Right? That's the reality that we're talking about when it comes to a religious level. Right? Montessori tells us that if you want to infuse new ideas, or if you want to create a new kind of human being, or you want your child to be different from you and be this better person, the time to do that is in early childhood. And that's why if you look at like religious groups like missionaries and things like that, they will go and they will work with the youngest of children. When you go to like Montessori courses in different countries, you'll always find nuns, right? You'll always find nuns, Christian missionaries there, and actually about maybe 30 years ago in Malaysia, there was a really excellent Montessori school, a really excellent one, and that one was a Christian missionary school. So if you look at other religious groups, they focus on the younger age group because they know that if you want to convert someone to a religion, you start from that young age, and you don't have to tell them the religion at the young age, you just have to be in their environment, and then you can influence them. So Montessori tells us that between 0 to 6, the child has a special mind called the absorbent mind. This is very different from our brains. The child's brain will absorb everything around them. For us, we look at our surroundings and we pick and choose what we want to pay attention to, right? But the child's brain will just take in everything. It will take in the way it's set up, it will take in the people inside it, their attitudes, their energies, the way that they communicate. Everything is absorbed by the child. You can think of this like the painter and the photographer. Us adults are like the painter. We pick and choose what we want to put in the painting, right? We choose what details we want to include. But the child is like the photographer. They just snap a photo, everything is there. Everything from the environment is there, unless you edit it, of course, which is the new thing. But before that, you couldn't really edit photos, so everything would be in the photo. So the child's brain is like that, like the photographer. Everything is being absorbed constantly. The way you talk to your child is being absorbed and it's forming part of who they're going to be. The way you interact with your spouse is being absorbed by your child and that's forming part of who they're going to be. The food that you eat, your child is watching you, they're absorbing that. That's going to be part of who they're going to be. Every single thing that the child is surrounded by is absorbed and it becomes part of their personality, right? It's not that they just absorb it and they know it. No, it becomes part of their personality. It forms who they're going to be. So if you want your child to be the best person they can be, you have to start with yourself to be the best adult that you can be, the best example that you can be, the best to your spouse, the best to your mother, the best to the people around you, and your child will absorb that. Everything around the child is absorbed. If your child is in a messy household, where the washing is here and there's some cups here and the pizza box from last Thursday is still somewhere, and they're going to absorb that. And then in their mind, they're going to have chaos, right? And then when they grow up, they're not going to be this organized person. They're going to have this chaos, right? They absorb that, they form that, right? And I can verify that because I come from, I grew up in quite a messy household. I'm sorry to say, my mum's not watching. I hope she doesn't get upset, but I grew up in a quite messy household. And then when I became an adult, I had to consciously find a way to keep myself organized and tidy. I had to constantly, this is an effort I have to do because my environment was not a neat and tidy one, so I didn't absorb that. Okay? So everything that you're exposed to forms who you are. So that means you have to provide the best environment for this absorbent mind of your child to take place. Between 0 to 3, she called it unconscious absorbent mind. Remember we said unconscious means the child doesn't even know that they're learning, doesn't even know they're absorbing, doesn't even know that they're developing. And then the next one, from 3 to 6, is conscious absorbent mind. So this is where the child becomes more conscious, they're more aware of themselves now, and they begin to show more specific interests, and then they focus on those interests, so they absorb more towards their interests, right? So basically, the summary of the absorbent mind is your child is constantly taking in everything around them. So make sure you provide the best environment. Not just the physical environment, it's not just about getting a pretty shelf and putting activities. The most important thing is, they're gonna absorb you. So make sure you can be the best person that you can be. At least in front of them. You know, I love to eat chocolate. So I had this big problem when my son was small. Is, you know, every time I wanted to eat chocolate, I had to go into another room and close the door, eat my chocolate, and then come out. I'd be like, I hope he doesn't catch my addiction, you know. And he's not that bad at chocolate, so I think I did the right thing, you know. So whatever quality you have that's not good and you don't want your child to absorb that, don't be it in front of your child. Try to work on yourself so that you don't do it anymore. But if you end up doing something that's not, don't do it in front of your child. Like one of the key things that I really don't like to see is when mothers gossip on the phone or they gossip with their friends or family in front of their child. Because if I ask you a question here, does anyone want their child to grow up to be someone who gossips and makes loads of stories or talks badly about other people? No, right? Even if you do it, you don't want your child to do that, right? So don't do that in front of your child, because they're absorbing that. They're absorbing that characteristic, and then they will become like that. And then they will have to struggle later on in their life to try and not be like that, because that's how they've already absorbed their characteristic. And that's just one simple example that we can straight away look at ourselves, right? So the key thing in this stage is the child is saying, help me to help myself. Not do it for me. We kind of think the child is saying, Mummy, you do it. No, they're saying, help me so that I can do it myself. And that's why I'm asking you to ask yourself, what do you do for your child that actually, if you provide the right setup, they can do for themselves. And Montessori tells us that never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed. So if there's something that a child they feel they can do, don't help them, let them do it. So many times we're in a rush, our child sits down, they want to put their shoes on, maybe they take 10 minutes to put their shoes on, and we feel like we don't have 10 minutes, right? So we just put the shoes on for them. But then what we've done is we're preventing that development of independence. We're helping a child with something that they can do, and that's not going to support their development. So arrange your life, your time, so that you can provide those opportunities for your child to take the time to do what they can. Montessori tells us that we may think that we're helping the child. In fact, anytime the child offers assistance or interrupts, she becomes an impediment to the child's growth. So every single time you go in there and you help your child, instead of letting them do it by themselves, you're impeding their development. You're preventing them from developing that. So don't. Stand back. Give them the chance. And some people will say to me, if I leave my child to put on his shoes, he's going to try for 5 or 6 minutes, then he's going to get frustrated, and then he's going to have a tantrum, and I don't want that to happen, so I just put his shoes on, right? So my thing is, it's not about you just leave your child completely and you just, they have to put their shoe on. No, it's not about that. It's about you leave your child to try. Let them try for as much as they can, and you only offer as much help as they need so that they can be successful. That's what it's about. Okay, next. So the period from 6 to 12. How many of you have children who are between 6 to 12 years? Okay, quite a few of you. Okay, this is my favorite period. Okay, I trained for Montessori 0 to 6, and I worked in that environment, and I loved it. And then I worked I trained for the elementary stage, and I worked with the children. And then I really discovered that I'm not for the younger age, I'm for the older age. And this last year we only had a 3 to 6 year old class in my school in Nusaibah, and then now we've just opened our elementary, and I feel so much more alive. Everybody has their stage that they're special for, right? Everyone has their stage that they're made for, right? And it's, every single stage is equally important. Every single stage. You have to have the people who specialize for 0 to 3. And you have to have the people who specialize for 3 to 6 and the people who specialize for 6 to 12. Everyone has their stage. What I like about this stage is that this is the stage where you're learning about everything in the world. We just told the great lesson, which is the story of the creation of the universe. And I love that story because you're basically talking to the small 6 and 7-year-olds about how the universe was created. And for me, every time I tell that story, I feel fascinated. Every single time I tell that story, I feel inspired, right? This is the stage that Montessori calls the intellectual period, and where we give the child the most intellectual knowledge, right? And the child is focused and interested in socialization. So those of you who are homeschooling, when your child comes to like 6 or 7, they start to always want to see friends, right? They want to see friends, they want to see their cousins, they want to work with this person, they want to be with their sister, they become very, very social. This is the time that a child is going to acquire all of those social skills, right? Montessori tells us the absorbent mind, it kind of dies down at around the age of 6, and then From 6 to 12, they have a new kind of mind called a mathematical mind. And this mind is the mind that analyzes information, it categorizes. It's more like the analytical, intellectual mind. And that's between 6 to 12. That's why it's suitable to give children this academic knowledge between 6 to 12. And she says that before, the child needed an environment that was based on reality. But between 6 to 12, now the child can begin to understand abstract concepts. So now they can begin to think about things or understand things that they cannot see directly in front of them. And so fantasy is suitable. And things that will expand their imagination are very suited to children during this stage. So I want to ask you a question for a moment. If you have a 4-year-old and you're talking about Jupiter and Saturn, and they cannot possibly imagine what they are, right? It doesn't mean they don't need to know. I mean, they can just know it as a general thing. But between 6 to 12, they can literally imagine Jupiter, right? They can imagine the stars. They can put all that information together and create their own kind of picture in their mind, right? Did any of you live in the days where you still listen to audio stories? Right? Did any of you before, when you don't have so many cartoons and children used to listen to audiobooks a lot? No? No one has that experience? There's still a trend even to today to play audiobooks for your children. Rather than showing them a cartoon, play audiobooks, because the audiobook will create that they can imagine for themselves. How many of you have read like a novel and then you watch the film? Yeah? So you read the novel, you create this imagination, this idea of what the story is, of the character, of how they look and how they react and how they walk and how they everything. And then you watch the film, and most people after they watch the film, they're like, that's not how it's supposed to be, right? And if all of you read the same book, everyone would have created their own imagination of that story. Right? That's how powerful the imagination is. And this period from 6 to 12 is the period for the development of the imagination. So we can give them all this intellectual knowledge, all this abstract understanding, and their imagination is able to take it and create their own picture. Right? The more information we give them, the more accurate that imagination is going to be, the more accurate that picture is going to be. So it's not between the ages of 0 to 6. This is one of the things that a lot of parents get wrong. They think that it's before 6 that children have this cute imagination and They're confusing the creativity of the child with this huge imagination. Because for a young child, like this boy over here, at one point he's pushing this thing, so maybe it's a car. At another point he's doing something else with it, so maybe it becomes like a person and so on. That's the imagination that they have. It's something concrete and they make it into whatever they want to, right? But when we're talking about the imagination for 6 to 12, we're talking about things that are beyond the concrete. Things that are beyond what they can see, they can feel, they can hear around them. That's the kind of imagination. So that means the child is at the right stage to learn history, they're at the right stage to learn science, they're at the right stage to anything that's to do with the universe and the world. This is the right stage for it. And that's why for the Montessori education, 6 to 12 is focused on what we call cosmic education. Cosmic education is about studying the universe. Cosmic comes from the word cosmos, and cosmos means the universe, right? So cosmic education is about studying the universe. So between the age of 6 to 12, the child is studying the universe. And everything that you learn in school, whether it's the water cycle, or it's the parts of the cell, or it's about forces and motions, whatever you learn in school, it's supposed to be so that you understand the universe better. You understand the world that you're living in better. But what's happened is the education system has taken those topics and then created them into a lesson, and you're learning it just to pass an exam. But actually you're supposed to learn about the water cycle so that you can have that understanding, and then you can enjoy your environment more. You can understand the world that you're in, and that can take you back to Allah. That can reinforce your belief in Allah. That can reinforce your tawheed. That can reinforce how incredible you see this creation of Allah in front of us. And we all know that There are many different sources that say, where the Prophet Muhammad told us that like 1 hour of reflection is equal to thousands and thousands of years of prayer, and so on. So 1 hour of just reflecting on your environment, reflecting on Allah's creation, just observing and thinking, wow, look what Allah did. That itself is a form of worship, right? So when we provide this information for the children during this stage, we are reinforcing that tawheed. We're reinforcing that belief system. When they're older, no matter where they go, they're going to have this strong grounding and strong belief in Allah and Rasul, right? I don't know if any of you have had experiences like this, but I've seen friends who grow up in a Muslim family. They grow up and they even sometimes they go to Islamic schools, and then when they become teenagers, they just leave Islam and they just go off. I mean, I don't know if there's many cases in Malaysia, but for those of us in the West, we see so many cases of people when they were faced by the life, where they're in an environment where people do not believe in Allah. A lot of people get pulled that way. I've got so many friends, I've even got siblings who've gone that way, right? Because that belief in Allah is not strong enough. That belief that Allah created everything and everything has been created with a purpose is not strong enough. So when you face the real world and you face your obstacles in real life, you get distracted and you go back to whatever it is that was instilled in you in the beginning. So if it's not Tawheed, then you will go back to not Tawheed, you'll go back to something else, right? If what was instilled is materialism, then you'll go back to materialism. If what was instilled was to believe that Allah has a plan for everything, then you'll go back to, oh yeah, this problem has happened to me, but Allah has a plan, right? So instill that idea. And between 6 to 12, when the child is doing this cosmic education, when they're studying about the universe, you're reinforcing that tawheed. They're seeing everything that's been created around them is with a plan. It's with precision. It's for a purpose, right? It's not, we don't just happen to have clouds. No, Allah created the clouds for this water cycle because it's so important. Because if we don't have this water cycle, there'll be too much water, or let's say the haze, for example. If it doesn't rain, we're not going to clear the haze, right? We're not going to clear. So the child gets to discover all of this science and understand how Allah created this world perfectly. Every single thing has a plan. And then they can look at themselves and they can say, what's our purpose? If the water has a purpose, if every animal has a purpose, if the sun has a purpose, every single thing we see around us has a purpose and has been created perfectly with a plan. So what's my purpose? What's my plan? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? How can I know what the right thing is that I should be doing, right? And that's why this cosmic education during this period is so important, because from that you will be building this tawheed with all the evidences, with all of the examples, so that no matter how hard your child's life is later on, they can hold firm to their belief system. And of course, all of us want that for our children. Every single one of us wants our child later on in life to grow up to be a good, salih person, right? As somebody who's strong with their deen. Nobody wants their child to grow up and to be somebody who's like, you know, doesn't want to pray, or someone who doesn't want to believe in God, or someone who's so focused on materialism. Nobody wants that. Even if you yourself want materialism, you don't want that for your child, right? Because the fitra of us is that we don't want that for our children, right? And that's why this stage is really important for cosmic education. And those of you who want to know more, I have a long talk where I go on and on about it. So just you can ask me or Atia about that talk, and I can share that with you, inshallah. This stage from 6 to 12, it's a uniform growth stage. Between 0 to 6, there's a lot of physical changes. The child's legs are growing, their proportion of their body is changing. And then at 6, they lose their milk teeth and grow their adult teeth. And then from 6 to 12, the child is pretty much the same. They're just getting taller, right? There's not much physical changes, right? It's just pretty much the change. So because they don't have many physical changes and they don't have many mental changes, it's a very calm period. That's another reason why they're ready to take in all this knowledge. right? Whereas from 0 to 6, they're busy growing their legs and growing their teeth and growing their hair and being able to walk. How can you bombard your child with too much information? And then from 12 to 18, suddenly, the boy's voice deepens, and then they start getting hair, and the girls start getting their periods, and then, all these changes are happening. And, I was listening to one of the talks, and they said that, your child went to sleep, and then they woke up, and their leg is longer, and they have to adapt to walking with these longer legs. How can you expect your child to sit at a desk every single day and just study when they themselves are not even comfortable within their own body because it's changing so fast? So you cannot pressurize them academically in that stage. You cannot give them all this pressure to do this, to do that. You cannot, because they're going through physical and mental changes. And remember I told you that 0 to 6 is the most brain development is going on? That comes back again between 12 to 18, right? Because the brain is going to change from a child's brain to an adult's brain. And when it changes, the brain doesn't just grow steadily like this. The brain doesn't just suddenly get bigger like this, no. One part of the brain will get bigger, and then your child, will become, the reptilian part will become bigger, and the child will be more reactory. You'll be like, oh my God, what's going on with my child? And that's because that part of their brain has become big. And the rational part of their brain is one of the last parts of the brain to develop to adult size. So you have this human being walking around with parts of their brain as adult size and other parts is still child size. So they can't balance themselves. But then in mainstream education, we get the child to go to school every day. They have to be in the classroom from 7 or 8 until 4:30 with other people that we don't really know, and they're supposed to control themselves and just follow the curriculum. But they're waking up every day, their brain is different, their arms are different, their legs are different. Right? So the time to give that academic knowledge is between 6 to 12. And what I've seen is that children between the age of 6 to 12, they can study anything to any level without limits if they're interested and if you give them the right information. So my son, when he was about 8 years old, he suddenly became obsessed with cars. And because he was in a Montessori environment, he was able to follow his interest, and he started to learn about the different car models and which one was the best one and which one had the best engine and da-da-da-da-da-da. He's not really interested in materialism of the cars, but it was more like the mechanical part of the car. And why is the Land Rover the best car? And why did they call it Land Rover? I mean, look at the name, Land Rover, And, he went through all the history of all the cars and the different brands and everything, and was very he'd meet you and say, oh, hello, nice to meet you. What car do you have? Oh, that car? They have a problem with this, and so on. Anyway, and as he was studying cars, he became interested in how the engine works, and then he created his own engine. And then he became interested in how the hydraulic system worked. And I said to him, look, I'm not that intelligent. I don't really know all the answers to all your questions. And thankfully we had where our school was, we had a secondary school just nearby. And the head teacher was a science teacher. So I said to my son, just go and ask this guy about this hydraulic thing, the question that you have, because I'm not so certain about how this hydraulic system works. Just go and ask him. So my 8-year-old son goes over with this diagram that he drew by hand of how everything works, right? And he goes over to the man and he goes, I need to ask you a question. You see, I figured out that the hydraulic system works like this, and if the car has this many cylinders, and if this, it's like this and this and this and this. But how about this part? And the guy turned around and looked at him, and looked at me, and looked at him. How old are you? 8. It's me. Did he do this himself? Yes. How did he find out this information? I don't know, he just looked at books. Just looked at the books. And the guy was like, even his 16, 17-year-old children who are doing their IGCSE do not know that. How does he know that? And then he sat down and he took my son through all these details about the hydraulic system and everything, and then he went back and he built his own, just from recycled stuff, he built his own model of the engine and the hydraulic system, and he explained everything to me, and I finally understood what he was talking about after all of that. But he could do that to a level of like, you know, maybe like college, university level, because he was in an environment where he was allowed to do it. And he was 8. And he did it without pressure, without stress, without someone forcing him, without someone teaching him. It was his inner teacher guiding him to do that. That's just purely how it happened. His inner teacher was guiding him to do that, and so he just went along with that. Right? So if you provide the right environment at the stage and you allow your child to follow their interests, they will go deep into whatever subject their inner teaching is calling to, and they can learn everything. So that when your child becomes in their teenage years, you don't have to pressurize them. They already have that academic foundation, so it's easy for them to go on to further learning. Okay? Let's go forward. We spoke about the mathematical mind. We said this is a mind that analyzes, that categorizes. So all the information that comes in, between 0 to 6, the information comes in, is absorbed. Whatever it is. That's what it is. And the child accepts it. Between 6 to 12, information comes in. Now the child starts analyzing. They start thinking about it. They start categorizing the information. Right? So there's 2 different brains. So you need to know what brain your child has. Because if they're below the age of 6, they're just absorbing everything. So you need to interact with them in that way where they're just absorbing. If the child is between the age of 6 to 12, they're analyzing. So now when you talk to them, you have to talk to them in a different way. And that's why you find if you have a 7-year-old and you have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, each one you're going to have to talk to in a slightly different way, because the way that their brain is developing and working is different. So Allah created the child with an inner teacher, and that inner teacher has its own mechanisms to teach. There's natural ways that children learn and develop, and that's what Maria Montessori was observing in the children. We don't have time to go into these in detail, but I want to give you an idea quickly of a few of the things that are naturally inbuilt within the child that helps them to learn and develop. And these are specifically for children below the age of 6. So the first thing that Montessori discovered is that, next one? No. Next? Okay. The first thing that Montessori discovered, that she says, is that she said every child has infinite possibilities to learn and develop. Every child is equipped with infinite possibilities, right? They could be anything. Every child has this genius already. The genius is the possibilities of who they can be, right? And this is like a positive energy within the child, a positive charge. And there's endless possibilities. So there's no child who is born and they can only do something like, you know, just up to that level. They can't really. There's no child who's born like that. Every child has this vast possibility. Every child. This is one thing that Montessori recognized. And some of us, I've spoken to so many parents, they'll say, oh, yeah, my first child is really, really clever, and my second one is a bit slow, but my third one is okay. And I'm thinking, huh? You already labeled your children and their possibilities, but she's telling us every child has endless possibility. Endless means beyond what you can imagine. So whatever you can imagine is the maximum possibility for your child. They have more than that. And this is, she called it nebula, because nebulas are balls of gases in space that have the potential to become anything. And one of these nebulas became a sun and our solar system and our galaxy. So it can become anything. So she used that example of a nebula to show us that they can become anything. Every single child is born with that. So in the brain, there's the possibility for any connection to happen. They just need the right environment. That nebula, if they're in the right environment, they can create all of these potentialities can become realized, right? So for example, there's the possibility to become independent. There's the possibility to learn grace and manners. There's the possibility to develop a belief in God. There's a possibility to be a patient. All of these potentialities are already there in a child. It only happens if we provide the environment for it to take place. Neuron connections, if you look at how the brain develops, the neuron connections, in order for them to happen, there has to be an experience. And the more the child experiences something, the stronger the connection will be until they have a strong connection in their brain. And that's why I got the picture of the brain now. Whereas if they don't have that opportunity, the neuron connection is not made, and then they do not develop that thing. So the potential of the child is that they can develop everything and anything. It all depends on what environment they're in, what experiences they have. I'm really rushing this part because if you want to know more, you can listen to one of the other talks. I go into detail about this. Montessori tells us that every child within them has a home. Okay? The home is an innate drive to learn. It's like an inner teacher. It's the drive within the child that pushes them to learn this or to learn that or to learn something. So they have this nebula, these huge potentialities, and then they have a home, and the home directs them to learn this now, or to learn that now, or to focus on this, to develop this, or to focus on that. And she says that this home is a divine force. Divine means godly, so it's from God. It's a divine force instilled within the child. So Allah has put an energy within the child that directs them to learn, which is basically an inner teacher, right? And if you allow the home to do its work, if you allow the inner teacher to develop the child, it will take them on a journey where they will learn everything. But if you block the way and you stop the inner teacher from working because you want your child to do something else, you prevent that inner teacher from doing its work. So the home of the child is going to pull the child to something specific. It's going to pull the child. If we work with the home, we're going to be observing the child and seeing where they're going and then helping them to do that, right? But what happens is that often educators and parents, they will have their own idea about what they want the child to learn, and they'll determine it themselves, and then they try to make the child follow what they want. But actually it's supposed to be the other way. It's supposed to be the child is following their home and we're supporting the home. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. Those of you who have babies, I'm sure you've seen the stage where as soon as your crawling baby sees the stairs, they make a beeline for the stairs, right? Right? Every time they see it, they just go. And no matter how many times you pick them up, they just go back to the stairs. And they go back to the stairs, right? Right? You've experienced that, right? I think every child does that, right? So the home is directing the child to develop their physical movement. Okay, now they can crawl on a flat floor, but now they want to be able to maneuver on obstacles. So the home is pulling the child to go towards the stairs, and then we pick up the child and we say, no, 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 you can't come to the stairs, come and sit here. And then sometimes we even put them in a chair and strap them in. And then we've just stopped the home. So the child is going to the stairs because that's what their home is calling them to do, because they have this potential to develop physically, right? And then we've stopped them and we put them in a chair, and now the home is disrupted. What happens when we disrupt the home is the child will become frustrated. They can become frustrated, they will cry, they'll have tantrums, they'll be unhappy. The more and more we disrupt the child's home, the more they become frustrated. So I'm sure many of you have heard the term terrible twos, right? Right? And many of you are familiar with the concept that 2-year-olds have tantrums, right? I just want to say, my 2-year-old never had a tantrum. I don't know what happens if I have another 2-year-old, but the first one never had a tantrum when he was 2, okay? Why? Because children have tantrums when they're frustrated. And usually they're frustrated because their home is pulling them to do something. And then we stop them. So the home is telling them, oh, you know, go to the stairs, and you're stopping them. But that pull is so strong, but then you stop them. And then it's pulling them again, and you stop them again, and then they get frustrated. And when that happens time after time after time after time, with many, many different things in their life, many different things, it happens, Then they have this inner frustration, and then they start these tantrums. Often the tantrum, it's not about the chocolate that they wanted, and it's not about the toy that they wanted to play with that broke. Often it's an inner frustration, you know? When you hear children having tantrums, often there's some underlying problem, and that can be traced back to the home being disrupted. So if you see your child go towards the stairs, what should you do? No, that would be irresponsible because it's dangerous, right? If you see your child go towards the stairs, you need to observe them first, and you need to think, hang on a minute, my child keeps going to the stairs. This means that my child has a need to climb up the stairs, but me as a parent, I know it's not safe. Anything can happen. So this is where we guide the home. We do our job to provide the right opportunity for the home to do what it needs to do in a safe way, because children don't know about safety. So then you can get some boxes or some wooden crates, or you can buy some small wooden steps and put it in your living room so that your child can go up and down and up and down safely. Right? So that urge to climb up the stairs, it's not being prevented, it's just being directed to a safe way to do it, right? And I remember when I was small, for my little brothers, I had loads of little brothers. So for my little brothers, when they were at that stage where they wanted to go up and down the stairs, we'd just get loads of cardboard boxes and loads of books and stuff and put them on the floor, and they'd make like an obstacle course, and they'd crawl up and crawl down. That's what we used to just naturally do, right? It doesn't have to be a fancy toy that you get for a child, right? But this is an example where you can see that you, as a parent, you observe the child, and then you see what the home is directing them, and then you take that and you give them the right opportunity for them to follow the home. And then they can reach their full potential in that. If you disrupt the home, right, you're doing a really big disfavor to your child. Because the home is like a light pulling the child. It's pulling the child to something. So if you imagine a door, and there's a bright light through the door, and you just want to go and see what's in that door, and then suddenly it's shut in your face. The door is shut in your face. They're just like, you cannot go through the door. So that's what we do. The home pulls the child, and then we just block the child. And we do that 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. Then they go to school, and it happens every day. Eventually, the home stops. Most of us are not in touch with our home. That inner teacher you have inside you, you can't even hear it anymore, right? You don't even know you have one, right? How many of you didn't know you have an inner teacher inside? Yeah, you didn't even know you had a teacher. You didn't even know that Allah created you and put a little teacher inside you that can guide you to learn, because you already lost touch with that, because of the way that you've been parented, the way your education system was and everything. But the reality is that if you support the home, then as the child grows, they're always going to have this inner teacher that's going to direct them to learn and develop and further and improve themselves. And this is something that Allah's put inside each one of us as a gift. So don't feel despair if you don't know your inner teacher. Don't feel despair. You can reconnect yourself. There are ways, but you have to go on a spiritual journey. There's ways to reconnect yourself. So my question to you, when you go home today, is what are you doing that is disrupting your child's home? Go back, take a few moments when you see your child, observe them. What are they being pulled towards? And what are you doing that's disrupting them? If there could be one thing that you take back from this talk, I want you to take back that do not let that burning fire in your child to learn about. Do not let that fire go out. Do not let that home stop. Do not let that inner teacher become silent. So I'm just going to really quickly touch on this, sensitive periods. So Montessori tells us that throughout childhood, children will be sensitive to specific stuff. There'll be certain things the child will be exposed to or they'll be interested in throughout their childhood. And she called that sensitive periods. And these are the crucial times. It's like a window of opening for them to develop something. So if you want them to develop something, if you want them to develop to their highest potential, you have to work with these sensitive periods. It's like a light that shines on something and everything else is dark. So it's like a window of opportunity. Once you miss that sensitive period, it's like you've missed a bus. You can never get on the same bus. Maybe there's another bus, but it's not going to be the same bus, right? If you support a child's development during that crucial sensitive period time, they will be able to develop to their full potential. Whereas if you miss a sensitive period, then it's going to take longer for your child to develop, it's going to be harder for your child to develop, and they won't necessarily reach that highest level. One example I can give you is that we have a sensitive period for developing the senses. Can you go to the next one? So we have a sensitive period for developing the senses between the age of 2 till 6, and from 3.5 till 6, that sensitive period for developing the senses is about refining senses. Okay? So, did you know that there are blind people who can touch this without being able to see anything, and they can tell you it's red just by touch? You know that? There's blind people who just by clicking their tongue they can say, oh, this is 12 meters, this is 3 meters, because they can hear the echo that comes off. So that means that the human people have the ability to have their senses refined to a much higher level than we have, right? But we don't refine them because we just do the basic, we just use our senses basically, and then we just get on with our life, right? We don't spend too much time refining our senses. But if you were in the sensitive period between the age of 3.5 to 6, and you were given activities and materials that can develop your sense of touch, you will be able to feel the difference between things. One of the things that I noticed that really made an impact for me is I can tell if something is wood or imitation wood just by touching it, right? And I've seen a lot of people will have something and they say, look, I found this thing and it's wooden, and I'll hold it and I'm like, that's not wood. And they're like, yes, it is wood. And it looks 100% like wood. But I can tell the difference of wood just by touching it. And one time I went to this interior design fair in Thailand, and Thailand has everything made fake, everything, and it looks real, it feels real, everything it's almost like it's the real thing, but it's not real, especially wood. They have all this wooden stuff that's not wood, right? So I remember I went with my friend and we were like going around touching stuff, and I say, that's not real wood, that's not real wood, that's not real wood. And everyone's like, how do you know? I was like, you know. And I thought, oh, it's because I went to Montessori school. And we actually have an activity on the shelf. It's somewhere over there, maybe I can take it out in a minute, where you feel different kind of pieces of marble and glass and wood. You feel it with your hand, and you get to match them and name what they are, right? So that's because I developed that sense. But maybe other people wouldn't necessarily know how to tell the difference between something that's wood and imitation wood just by touching it, right? So these are the sensitive periods between the ages of 0 to 6. We have movement, order, speech, small details and tiny objects, senses, meaningful activity, grace and manners, religion, writing, reading, and mathematics. Those are the sensitive periods, so that already guides you to what your child will be learning during that stage. And then these are the sensitive periods for a child between the age of 6 to 12 years. You have justice and moral judgments, social relationships, money and economic value, abstract use of imagination, history and time, tools and machine, human culture, how the world works, and abstract thinking. Right? So these are the sensitive periods. So this is how the child their learning will be directed towards these things during that stage. If you want more information about this, I have a talk where I just go over all of this, because this is the most fascinating, these sensitive periods. Okay, but I just want you to have an idea of what these are. So that's really quick, just like I've just touched like one tiny dot on what Montessori said about the child, right? There's a lot more, but we don't have much time, so I'm going to quickly go over onto the environment. Okay? So we said that there's the child, the environment, and the teacher. So Montessori tells us that education is not something which the teacher does or the parent does, but it's a natural process which develops spontaneously in human beings. It is acquired not by listening to words, but in virtue of experiences in which the child acts on his environment. So the child is not learning based on what we teach them. It's based on how they interact with the environment. That's how